Hello, and welcome to the Texas Mind Exchange. My name is Cody Gould, and I'll be your host. Today, we were honored to be joined by Pastor Darius Todd of the Abundant Life Christian Church here in San Marcos. We spoke about the church's role in mental health, what connection means in our community, as well as heard his vision for what our community needs and what the future of our community has in store in regards to integrating both Christian values as well as mental health services for all of our community members. So without further ado, welcome to the Texas Mind Exchange. Just as a reminder, all statements expressed by our guests on this podcast are their own and should not be considered official views or opinions of myself or anyone else at Texas State University. Pastor Todd.
Yes.
Thank you so much for joining us today. The big reason why I asked you to be on this podcast, which is the Texas Mind Exchange with Translational Health Research Center for Texas State University, our whole goal is to open up the conversation around mental health in Central Texas. There seems to be no one organization or person who's making waves like you are.
Oh, wow.
And I say that from the bottom of my heart, from everything that I'm noticing. My whole job is to interact with the community and see, and I just keep hearing your name pop up. And whether it's on different grants or whether it's on, people saying that I should talk to you, or the Translational Health Research Center should reach out. Hearing about your story, which I'm excited to get into, not only hearing about your story, hearing about what Abundant Life Church is doing, what your kind of perceived integration of the church and mental health is. It just seems like this is something different and something special, and people want to learn from you.
Wow.
And I think that is a big pull for why we wanted to have you on, to give you the space to be able to talk and talk to me about it, talk to the audience about it, talk to all of us about like what you're doing and how others might be able to join you or replicate it in other places or things along those lines, just because it seems so amazing. So I would love to start, and I know kind of off screen we were talking a little bit about this, but I would love to start because I think it's so unique about your background, how you ended up where you are now, what that looks like, and then we can kind of take it from there.
You got it. Well, first of all, Cody, let me acknowledge what you've just said and let you know how humbling it is to hear those things. I don't ever consider myself to be anything spectacular. My focus is to be genuine and to be consistently real with what I believe God has called me to be. There have been many areas of my life where I have struggled to become authentically myself, and also to maintain that authenticity. I was going to tell you that if you've been hearing about me in places you go, you need to change where you go. No, I'm joking. But truly, I enjoy life. And I want others to enjoy it as well. Therefore, I have a passion for helping people. And so to talk about my background and kind of what caused me to be who I am, I'll share with you some areas that I don't even know if I actually shared with you. And I've described the fact that my father was military. We grew up in a military household. My dad was enlisted during the Vietnam era. And he was drafted, and he didn't necessarily have the desire to serve his country at first, but he found great joy in doing the work of serving the country and also taking care of a family that was growing. My father, when I was born at Shepherd Air Force Base in 1970, we moved to San Antonio until I was about 3. And then from the time of 3.5 till 6.5, we lived in Turkey. We did not live on a military installation. We lived with the Turkish people. That is truly where I can say was the formative portion of why I become such a servant and have such a desire to bless and to heal people in my space. We saw people that didn't have legs. We saw people that were in extreme poverty. We saw people that we were living with and going to school with because we went to a Turkish school. That we were watching them, and they were like us, but they had many different challenges. That was a war-torn country. The Turkish people and the Greeks did not like each other and have not liked each other for an eon. And so to be in an environment where the Greeks were threatening war, and also we had to endure situations with bomb sirens and all types of emergency preparation events. Whereas as a child, one of the first memories that I have is of my at nighttime playing in our living room in our apartment, because we lived with the Turkish people, and hearing a bomb siren and my parents getting overwhelmed and rushing around, turning out all the lights, putting sheets on the windows because it was a blackout so that they wouldn't know where to drop the bombs, and seeing their frantic efforts to save us and to keep us from having trauma, keep us from having our lives lost. I learned in those early days, 3, 4, 5 years old, that as my parents got more escalated in their energy and in their franticness, that if I calmed down and I came to a place of peace, then things went a lot better. Because if I responded and reacted to the way that they were reacting, then that was not a good thing. But if I became more calm, then I would bring peace into that space. What that taught me, even as an adult, I had a COO. We were dealing with the swine flu pandemic. And our COO of the health department where I worked had just pulled me into a meeting with Governor Perry. He was on a video call. And our COO, her name is Dee Porter, one of the most awesome people I've ever met in my life. But Governor Perry gave her a mandate that we needed to stand up a call center within the next 12 hours. And she turned to me and looked at me and said, "Darius, can we do that?" And she whispered to me, "Do not tell me yes if the answer is no." And I said, "Yes, Dee, we can." And she said, "Well, how long will it take to get that done?" And I told her, "Give me 6 hours," because I knew I could do it in 2. And as we walked out of that meeting, she said, "Darius, I don't understand how you can remain so calm." I said, "Well, it's because the Greeks don't like the Turks." Of course, she had no idea what I was meaning by that. But then I described to her that in those times of distress, in those times of discomfort, if we find a place of peace, we can move forward. And so all of that has translated into the purposes that I found myself in places of distress. My response is peace. My response is shalom, if I can say it that way. And so I've found that as we move forward and find people that are in all different manners of life, whether they're in the penthouse or whether they don't have a house, I find myself speaking peace to every situation. And so in those spaces where you've heard my name, it's strictly because I desire to bring peace where there is not peace. So I hope that gives an adequate answer and maybe an introduction to who I am and why.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely think it does. And I think that this idea of bringing peace is so in line of what I wanted to talk with you about today. And specifically about how your church is ingraining itself into the community in a potentially different way that people think that churches might.
Sure.
With you having more of a focus on, I don't know exactly the terminology you might use for it, but I would say community engagement, whether it be mental health or homelessness or things that people are struggling with. Mm-hmm. Yes, some churches have historically kind of focused on some of those areas, but it feels like you might be taking a different approach to this.
Yes.
And I would love to hear a little bit more about what that different approach looks like, and we can go from there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I really, I have to start from the beginning.
Okay.
The beginning of our ministry, we actually, this April is our 33rd year in ministry. I've been the senior pastor for 5 years. That means that before me, there was another. His name is Pastor Paul Bunton. He's a New Yorker, came from Harlem, New York, and was moved to Texas without knowledge of why am I coming here. I won't tell you his whole story. Maybe one day we can talk about that in detail. But when he was moved to start Abundant Life, he wrote down the vision. Okay. Every good organization should have a vision that is easily understood. Our vision causes us to build people from places of burnt out hopes and dreams and faulty lifestyles to learn how to live the abundant life that Jesus came to give to us. In that, he also talked about the plan. There are 5 parts of our plan. The worship center, a drug rehabilitation center, a faith feeding center, which is a place that people can get food, and also a place where people can learn to be discipled, a discipleship training center, and then also some other community outreach efforts. And so everything that I am doing today was actually written in our vision over 30 years ago. So interestingly enough, people would ask me when I was getting ready 5 years ago to take over as the senior pastor, they would say, okay, well, Darius, what are you going to do different? What are we going to change about the vision? What are we going to change about what we're called to do? And my answer was, we're not going to change anything, because what I have found is that the vision of our ministry is more relevant today than it was even 30 years ago. So what we've begun to do is begin to activate the vision. Okay. And so interestingly enough, my career working 26 years for the Department of State Health and then finalizing the remainder of my state service at the comptroller's office has all been about helping people. Now we've taken the responsibility of being married to the mission, but not married to the methods. So what we've done is said, okay, we may have had some methods over the past 30 years that have been beneficial possibly, but maybe some of them weren't beneficial. I'm a man of the gospel, a man of the word of God. And so what Jesus told us is that we are to clothe the naked and feed the hungry. What I find many times in ministry, even our church has done, is we became really good at clothing the hungry and feeding the naked. Meaning that we haven't necessarily listened to our community to say, what is the real need? We've come with a program and said, well, this is what we do. And therefore we need to feed you with what you need to do, what we feel that you need. What the Lord gave me the insight to do is to say, listen to what the needs of the community are, and I will give you strategies on how to meet it. So what we've focused on in the past 5 years, and actually not just the past 5, but the entirety of our ministry, but specifically under the leadership that I've been responsible for, with listening to the needs of the community and finding that there have been some very valid and very amazingly prepared areas of life that we've been prepared for that we didn't know that we were going to be useful in this season. So one of those areas is in mental health. In the 26 years of working for the Department of State Health, I worked for a long period of time in mental health and substance abuse. My responsibility was information technology, but at the level that I was working, I had to be entrenched in and ingrained in the everyday work of, say, Austin State Hospital. I had to be entrenched and ingrained in the policy making and the implementation of said policies and being creative. I'm going to regress for just a moment and share with you something my father did for me. My father, when I was 12 years old, told me a story about his mother. His mother, whom I never met because she passed away before I was born. They lived in Buffalo, New York. She was cooking breakfast one morning for him and his brother. And in the middle of her cooking breakfast, she turned to them and put a paper clip on the table. And then she went back to cooking breakfast. And my father told me, he said, I was looking at this paper clip and like, why did mom put this on the table? And so he said, hey, why did you put this on the table? And her only response was, somebody made that. Okay, yeah, it's sitting here in front of us. But what her impetus was is you should be creative like the individual that made something as simple as a paperclip. Find out what the need is and meet that need in the most reasonable, logical, creative way that you can. He taught me that when I was 12. When I was 12, I started my first business. And he helped me to develop and cultivate that business. From that point forward, I began to look at things in a different way. I am a systems thinker. I look for the gaps. I look for the intended consequence of the decisions that we make. And I look to determine what is the best way and hopefully the most simple way we can come together to meet a need. As I became pastor, I started looking at, I was still working. I was bivocational at the time. I was looking at some of my employees. They didn't know, because it was right at the beginning of COVID, that I was sick with COVID because we were all at home. They had no idea that I was taking meetings and then I had 102, 103 fever. They didn't know that I was watching CNN with the rest of them. And that was at the beginning of COVID. And it seemed as if everyone who had COVID was dying. They didn't know that for 3 entire weeks, I was going through the most drastic transition and transformation in my life. I had packed my death bag to go to the hospital and be intubated. I had had my conversations with my family. If I don't make it, here's what I want you to do. I had called my boss and told him, I don't know what to do at this point. We talked to human resources. They said, you're the first person in this company to go through this. So we don't know what to do either. And I'm consoling my employees, one of whom called me frantic, saying, Darius, I need help. I don't know what to do. I said, well, what's going on? I'm having anxiety and I don't know how to address it. And I said, well, what are you doing during the day when you're working? Well, I'm watching CNN. So what do you do in the evening to relax? I watch CNN. What do you do when you wake up in the morning? I watch CNN. And I told her, you need to watch the Cartoon Network because your anxiety is not going to get better. But what I will offer you is we have some mental health resources within our company. And I want you to take advantage of that. And I'm going to make the phone call with you because I don't want you to be overwhelmed. Now, she has no idea that I'm going through the same struggles, but also having the disease that everyone is afraid of. So the moral of the story is, during that time, having worked in mental health, I began to understand we need an answer and an antidote for those who don't even know what the issue, how to respond to what they're going through. And so me and another pastor friend of mine began to speak. This individual's in San Antonio, and she had the same encounters. And she said, you know what, Pastor, we need to build a system that is going to address the needs of our community. And so Pastor Veron Blue began to build relationships with those who were working in mental health response and began to say, you know what, we need to train lay people to be able to be first responders to these issues that we're seeing. And I said, you know, that is so key because I've got certain background and certain knowledge and understanding, but I cannot be the only person that people come to. Therefore, if you'll set up the training, I will send droves of people your direction. And so over the past 4.5 years since we started that training, in our ministry, we have trained 12 people. Interestingly enough, even last night, one of those trainings, because we have trainings on Mondays and Thursdays, all by Zoom and in person. On last night, we had training concerning sexual abuse, pornography, and other types of perversions that our children are dealing with and how to address that. This comes 3 weeks after one of our teens tried to commit suicide because of some very things that we were talking about last night. And so we are experiencing the outcomes of people's trauma as we're being trained to heal them. And what we have become is a place for broken people to be made whole. And the physical and purposeful training that we have imparted to our people in the church has been a major impact to people in the church and people who are not in the church that would never consider a church. But we've been able to extend our service to those in the community, those who don't even have a desire to know God. We've had an opportunity to minister life to them as well. And in that, last thing I'll share here is that the Lord has also given us opportunity to build layers of mental health response. So not only do we have people within our ministry that are trauma aware, we consider ourselves a trauma informed ministry, but we also have a layer of licensed professional counselors that I can call upon and say, this individual needs further assistance. Now we have the ability to get them escalated to another level of support. And we have now received a couple of grants that were able to help pay for that. We were coming out of it from our ministry funds and personals, individuals that desire just to see people healed. And if they don't have insurance or other capacities, we want to build into that the capacity to get that healing done. And then last thing, recently we've been working with MHDD, which is a psychiatric mental health provider within our area. And we're developing an MOU and a business agreement that would allow us to be able to escalate, excuse me, so that if anyone needs psychiatric care, medication, that they could also receive that through our program. So this is one of the facets of the areas that we're working through to deal with that outreach into the community. In addition to our feeding program, so we're dealing with food insecurity. We also are getting more into helping people that are dealing with homelessness at all levels. We also are in the process of working through some wonderful communication with other entities that will allow us possibly to offer some affordable housing. And all of these things that I'm talking about were written in our vision 30 plus years ago. So some people are saying, well, Pastor Todd, you're just an innovator. Well, I do consider myself that, but the foundation was laid well before I began this process. And I believe that we've been fashioned to be built to help other people. We have a template that I believe can be replicated in other areas, not just in church environments, but other entities could get involved, because I believe that we're a part of the solution. We don't own the whole of the solution, but we are a partner with many people. And that's where I'm finding the growth, is that we are fulfilling one part, and maybe another organization like the HEAL Alliance is dealing with another part. The Hays County Health Department, Peyton Wagner, dealing with another part. And so we partner with all of those who are a part of the solution. And we want to be very adept at what we're responsible for, so that we can be an appropriate partner in helping everybody to get done what's necessary.
The first word that comes to mind is holistic.
Yes.
Holistic in the sense of like understanding the breadth that of issue or of potential situation that people are going through. Mm-hmm. And you understanding that we all have a role to play.
Absolutely.
And teeing ourselves up to, or you specifically, teeing yourselves up to do what's best for everyone else, and also playing towards your strengths.
Sure.
First and foremost, wow, thank you so much for that context. Understanding what your church's focus on is, understanding how you haven't deviated is, I think, a really important background knowledge for people to have, mm-hmm. because this has always been the mission. Mm-hmm. And knowing that our world has changed significantly in even 5 years, to see that was the mission just 5 years ago, and I'm sure even longer, 30 some odd years ago when the church was started.
Absolutely.
That leads me to ask, like, are you noticing different trends of challenges that might be different from 5 years to now? Like, obviously the mission is still the same, mm-hmm. but are there different trends? Are there different struggles? Are there different things that you feel like the focus might have to deviate a little within a certain range, or is the focus of the mission still congruent with what you're talking about?
Absolutely. So I can say that what we've seen in the community is very congruent with what we began with. Here's where things have expanded: education. I think that many people have dealt with generational trauma. People have dealt with all different types of areas of life where they felt like, oh, this is just normal. This is what my family goes through. This is how we address those types of issues. And so as we begin to educate people and help them to understand, there is a standard of life that is better than what you've dealt with. We're educating folks to say these things, actually, some of the things that you've just described are not normal. And though it may be a consistent thing that you and your family, or you and your friend group, or you and people in your area of the world are dealing with, maybe these things are not healthy. It's a difficult conversation to have, because when you shift people's paradigm and say that maybe I'm not normal, well, you're just saying that because you're a pastor. You're just saying that because you have a different way of living. You have a different way of thinking. And I'm like, no, this is just the anxiety that you're struggling with. That's not something that is normal, and something that we can give you some tools that will help you to be able to respond better. Because right now you're very reactive. It's just a knee-jerk reaction that you're giving to this issue, and we can help you to be responsive and help you to really grow through the process. I'll give you an example. I had a young man come to me 3 days ago, and he told me, he said, Pastor, I'm going to tell you something that I've never told you. Sure, what's going on? He says, well, I was diagnosed bipolar 3 years ago. And when I told my parents, they got angry. You're not bipolar. This is not something. They're telling you that. And he said, I've been struggling with all of these issues, and I thank you for walking with me through them. He said, but I don't know if that bipolar is something that I should accept or not. And I shared with him, I said, and he said, because I'm a person of faith, I believe that what I have is going to be cured and healed by Jesus. And no matter what they say, I'm just going to keep on fighting what they said. And my response to him is, I said, if you go to the doctor and they say you have a broken bone, you're not going to say, well, I'm going to be healed. I don't want your cast. I'm going to be healed of this. You would take the cast, would you not? He said, yeah, I guess I would. I said, well, why is it so difficult to accept that maybe there's something that I need assistance with? I'm going to give you a different paradigm. I'm going to share with you that what that practitioner told you is taking everything that you've dealt with in your life, and you don't have an answer for why you struggle with these different things, and honing it down to a target. And now I can say, I'm going to take and aim at that target, and I'm going to aim not at the millions of things that I'm experiencing, but I'm going to aim at that target. I said, wouldn't that be a lot better for you if you had something where you could say, now I understand the panoply of what I'm dealing with is this target. That makes it a lot easier for you to be able to focus and say, maybe these are the things that I need to deal with. Because when you've come to me and you're dealing with mania, you've come to me and you're dealing with severe depression and mood swings that you can't explain. And you're coming to me saying, Pastor, I've been crying for 3 days and I don't know why. Maybe that diagnosis is a target that we can start to say, that's what we need to address. And as he began to cry and say, wow, I never thought of that. Maybe it's okay. The stigma began to diminish. The overwhelming feeling of being out of control began to become focused on that one area. And I was thankful to be able to tell him, I've got people that can help you. Because in the past, we didn't have that. In the past, I remember the first time I dealt with someone that was going through a bipolar episode, and we had no clue. This was 25 years ago. We had no clue of what to do. And so we did what any good church would do. And we began to pray, and we began to come around that family, and we began to ask for healing. We sent her to a physician, and she didn't receive the responsiveness that she needed, but she did get some medication. And it seemed to be okay, but we didn't know much about mental health support. We had no idea about licensed professional counselors and psychiatrists that could help. Now that individual is getting that type of care. But 20 years ago, we didn't have the tools. We didn't have the verbiage. We didn't have the education to know what to do. So we're taking that darkness, that dark area that is a place that is taboo. That place that is said, well, we're spiritual people. We don't deal with those things. That's science, and we don't like science. Well, we found that science and faith are congruent in many areas. It's not by accident that in Isaiah, the Lord says that you will be repairers of the breach, where there are people that are on one side of the chasm that need what's on the other side, and we're going to build a bridge. And then it also says in Psalm that Jesus is close to the brokenhearted, those who are struggling with darkness and do not know what to do. If the word of God says that Jesus is close to the brokenhearted, but we shun the brokenhearted, there's an issue. There's a problem. Because Jesus said that I will not cast them away, and I will not leave you in the darkness of depression. David said, though I find myself in hell, you're there with me. David was in a cave, in a chasm, a physical cave and a state of depression where everything in his life, he was physically being hunted by the king. And he also had no one to depend on. And he was crying out to God. And in that dark place, he found himself crying out to God and saying, even though I'm in hell, you're there with me. So that's why I tell people all the time that I will go to the dirt with you. I will stand with you. I will lay with you. I will cry with you. I will weep with you. I will be angry with you. I will stay where you are, because there are too many people that when I was going through depression, when I tried to commit suicide twice, there was nobody around. And I thank God that he was there, even though I was angry when I woke up the next day. I thought that I didn't have a reason for living. And when I did all those dastardly things to my body, and I was angry when I woke up the next day, then I started to realize maybe I do have a purpose in this world. And I'm finding that purpose is to be with people and to be that place of healing for the brokenhearted.
What you said, everything of what you said has spoken to me. The biggest thing that stuck out was this idea of connection. And sometimes I think we use the word connection and community simultaneously, but something specifically about what you said really spoke to me about the how deep connection can change something, can change somebody's mindset. And granted, I am in school to become a licensed professional counselor, as well as working here full time. And I understand that, there are diagnoses that people might get that might make connection difficult. But what I'm noticing specifically from you is the role that connection can play in somebody's healing. And because I know that there are so many people out there that might be struggling with that connection, might be feeling like they're depressed, and it's hard to go outside when that is happening. What do you think that, I guess, obviously the church's role in connection is pivotal. It is a place where people congregate, but there's something more about that on a religious side, as well as just a community side. I'd love to hear more about kind of your perspective of connection and community, and kind of maybe what is even changing in Central Texas that you're seeing, if you see any trends.
Yeah. Well, I tell you what, you hit a chord. You struck a chord. For me, connection is the core of who I am. I think growing up as a military child, even when we were on bases and we stayed for a long time in San Antonio, as I was in high school there, even as I was there, people around me were always moving. So I never knew if I was going to have a friend for very long. And a lot of times those connections were fleeting. And because being in the military, you sometimes you learn to relate to people long enough, but you don't want to connect with them. I coined a phrase that I've been using a lot lately when my mother passed away. Our mourning and our grief is the privilege of the deep connections and the love that we've had with those that we care for. And so when we go through mourning and grief, it is the privilege that we receive in knowing that we had a deep-rooted connection with someone. And that's something that a lot of times we try to shield ourselves from, because we don't want to go through the pain of loss. Therefore, we strive to sometimes even become a stranger in a crowd. Community is a word that is used very often, but the depth of your connection with the individuals in your community is the key to your success. I had the privilege of sitting with a young lady who called and said, "Pastor, I need a place to stay. And the hotel, I'm homeless. The hotel that I'm living at is telling me that I owe for 3 days. How do we get this resolved? Someone at this hotel told me to call you." So I don't know how they got my number, but they called me. And the blessing was this. I said, "Well, Lord, our benevolence fund is down. And so I called my wife and said, 'Hey, can we spare this?' She said, 'Yeah, let's just do it.' So I went over there and I was going to just pay the hotel because I'm used to doing that. And as I got there, the young lady was sitting outside and she said, 'Are you Pastor Todd?' I said, 'Yes, I am.' And as she walked up to me, she said, 'Pastor Todd, thank you so much.' She had tears in her eyes. She said, 'Everybody else that I called didn't come to my rescue, but you did.' I said, 'Well, you know what? I really believe that the Lord gave me grace to be able to be here. So don't consider me anything great. I'm just here to help.' She said, but before you make this payment, I want to share with you that this is my wife. And I don't know if that changes what you're going to do, but I just needed to let you know that that me and my wife are needing a place to stay. And I just wanted to make sure that you know that, because that might be against your morals. I said, helping people is my morals. The Lord says that I'm to love him with everything in my heart, mind, and soul, and to love my neighbor as myself. I don't care what label you carry. I don't care what your background is. You don't know my background, but you still stand with me, and I'm standing with you. And at that moment, I knew I had to go, but something told me, you need to sit and talk with them. In the 30 minutes that we were able to sit and share heart to heart, we built a connection. And those ladies knew that I cared for them, but more so, God cared for them. That's what we're missing in this world, is connection. When we see people who are politically separated, we see people who are morally separated, we see people who are emotionally separated, and people don't want to come to the table and build relationship. That grieves me more so than anything, because ultimately I believe that, you know what, even you and I, we're not going to agree on 100% of everything, and that's okay. But you know what, where we do intersect in our passions, let's work there. Sometimes I've been ostracized from different groups because of my title as a pastor and because of my convictions as a Christian. But my focus is to pull down those walls and allow there to be a connection, because you know what we all have in common? We're all human. We're all living in this world. We all have an experience that can enrich one another. The backgrounds and the victories that you've had can help me to have victory in my life. The areas where you've struggled can help me in my struggle. And so let there be a connection, no matter what our backgrounds and history is. And lastly, I'll share this. When I worked in HIV and STD prevention, I worked there. Probably that was the closest and the most rewarding place that I worked in with the Department of State Health. I worked around 90% of the folks that were around me were gay, lesbian, transgendered, and this was in the early 90s. I'll never forget the first time I had an experience that shifted my perspective, running into a bathroom and seeing a dress standing at the urinal. And I was shocked. I thought I went into the wrong bathroom. And I was so embarrassed. And I ran out of there and I said, wait a minute, that's the men's bathroom. And then I started to realize, well, sir, not everybody's like you. And that was on October 31st. So I figured it was a costume. And the next day, that individual came back to work dressed the same way. And the next day, that person came to work dressed the same way. And the beauty was, I strived and did my best to ensure that as this person was making a transition into another life, that I remained and kept that connection with the individual, because I don't care how you're dressed. My focus is you're still a person. You're still a real person that I love and I want to share life with. And so the moral of the story is, even those things don't separate us, but our life experience can sometimes separate us. Our background and our culture can separate us. And so if I refuse to let any of those things restrict me, that's what I saw Jesus do. I saw Jesus look at Zacchaeus in the tree. I saw him look at the Samaritan woman, that if you don't know the history, Jews and Samaritans were half Jews, and they were shunned by the Jews because they weren't pure. They weren't true. If I can look at Samaritans all around me, of which I'm a Samaritan also, but I'm of this Samaritan sect, or I'm of this, I strive to build bridges. And even though people that I build bridges with, sometimes they destroy those bridges, I build them back and make a possibility for a reconnection to occur. Healing in forgiveness, healing in restitution, healing in relationship. I believe that's what we should all be about.
I just can't help but say thank you every time you speak. It's just, I feel like every word I'm learning something new, both about you and your mission and your view on life. And I just appreciate hearing that.
Sure.
And And this talk about connection obviously expands outside of just interpersonal connection.
Mm-hmm.
It might be organizational connection. I know that you mentioned earlier Hays County Health Department as well as MHDD. When you think about kind of more of these connections, because obviously Abundant Life Church, the ability for you to kind of have the sprawling impact that you want might be limited with the amount of people that you have, under your roof.
Mm-hmm.
So building those kind of organizational connections expands that impact.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of what is the goal? Is the goal everyone? Is the goal Central Texas? Is kind of, I guess, love to hear more about like that the impact that you would desire to have and what's the vision around it.
Mm-hmm. If I say this, you promise not to be nervous?
Yeah, of course.
My goal is the world. I really, truly believe that from San Marcos, we can change the world. I believe that as we model ministry, as we model the work in the community and the work in the kingdom of God and how they mesh and match, I believe that we can shift paradigms and we can change hearts and minds. I remember one day I was praying. Every Wednesday night we have Bible study. But before Bible study, I always want to put God and the people first. And so we spend an hour praying for anyone who needs prayer, working with and talking with anyone who needs to have a conversation. This world is a difficult place to be in sometimes. And we call Wednesday hump day for a reason, because we climb that hill and now it's like, oh my gosh, I'm carrying a whole lot of baggage. So on Wednesday evenings, we pray with people and we spend time with people, and then we break bread. We break bread in the Word, and we also sometimes just go and eat. One of those Wednesdays, I really do believe that I hear God. And as we were praying corporately, I felt the Spirit of God say, pray for the areas where I've given you influence. I said, well, Lord, I feel helpless. I don't feel like I'm like very influential at all. And so I began to pray for San Marcos, and he said, more. So I began to pray for Hays County, and I began to pray for Wimberley and Buda, and I began to pray for Kyle, and he said, more. And I began to pray for New Braunfels and Austin and San Antonio. You know, I'm used to these areas. And he said, more. And I was like, well, I don't know what to pray for. He said, and the Spirit of God, I really feel said, you have technology, go get it. So I grabbed my iPad and I started just praying over the map. I pulled up the maps, and I just, and he kept saying, pinch out. I was like, okay, pinch out. And so after I prayed for all 50 states, and then he's pinch out, and I said, okay, I'm praying for Canada, and I'm praying for Mexico. He said, pinch out, Central America and South America. And as I was doing all this praying and interceding, he began to share with me that just like during the pandemic, churches were individual entities, and they may have had connections with other churches, but outside of people coming to you, you didn't have much effect outside of you. But then the pandemic changed everything. Everybody got online. And so one of the things that he told me a long time ago is that we have the capacity to affect every place that we have influence. You know, and I'll give you my methodology there. On the internet, we know that there are people that we call influencers. Okay, YouTube, like and subscribe. You know, we share this with your friends and comment and do all. So we know that influence is out there. And for the world, influence draws money. Okay, and so I started to recognize that the greatest currency in the world is not cash or gold, but it is influence. And so our responsibility is to cultivate that influence. When we have something positive that we want to positively influence folks with, then that influence needs to be guarded and protected. Because as we go through this world, we know that many people have fallen. People have gone from great heights and been brought down. And so my focus is that we should be as pure in our influence as possible. I hope I'm answering the question, but I want to add this last piece. I believe that the template of what we're doing can be replicated anywhere. I don't think we're that special or anything. I believe that we've been given the resources that we have and the opportunities that we've been given to share with the world that there's something different, something better, something more unifying that we can entertain and then begin to act on, that will cause there to be healing where where diversity has caused us to be disparate. But now we can come together for one cause, and that is the healing of individuals so that they may be truly built into what our vision says, learning to live this abundance of life. I was one that when I was here at Southwest Texas State years ago, my whole goal was to do everything I could to fill my cup. I wanted to take from everyone that I could. I wanted to take from the professors so that I could get knowledge. I wanted to take from my friends so that I could get followers. I wanted to take from the young ladies that I dated so that I could get emotional security. I wanted to take. When I really dedicated my life to the Lord, He showed me that a life like that is a life that is a black hole. You will never receive enough to be satisfied. He said, now if you will translate that into being a giver in life, everything that you have need of will come to you. And so I began to now say, my life is not a taking life. It is a giving life. And now the people around me, as I was sharing with you in private, they get it and they are giving as well. And so I believe that if we can create a community of givers, then we will be a community that is completely fulfilled. I thought that was something that was very unique. And then I looked in the book of Acts, and in the book of Acts, the people came together, and it says that they gave to each other as each had need. Meaning that if I saw that you needed food, I gave you food. If I saw that you needed clothing, I gave you clothing. And that wasn't something that happened from the top down. That happened horizontally between individuals. I believe that we have a responsibility and a mandate to be givers. And if we can change that paradigm in our local community, in our extended community, it can impact the entirety of the world.
Absolutely. Yeah, that the flipping and having the understanding of giving and what giving can do is so important. It's so important. And that leaves me to ask you the last question that I have, which relates back to the challenge that you feel that you're going through, both as the leader of the church, as well as somebody who's trying to make waves for our Hays County community, as well as the world. When you think about the biggest hill you have to climb, or the biggest challenge that you're focusing on right now, I know the words of stigma have come up. The words education have come up. Is there anything more like specific in regards to a challenge that you feel like you have to focus on that could be the last barrier before really breaking through and making an impact? That is something that is like never to forget.
Yes. There are so many things that I could share that would be barriers. But as I said, I'm a systems thinker. So really, my focus is resource. Okay. I'm going to give you my philosophy there. I believe that God is the source of all things, and we are a resource of the things that He provides to us, whether we ask for it or not. He gives us resources to be a resource to others. However, there are also physical resources that we need. I loved working for the Department of State Health. The Department of State Health is funded by hundreds of different funding sources. Unlike many other organizations within the state of Texas, hundreds, the CDC, the NIH, the local organizations, and others. Moving from there, working for the comptroller provides all the state funds for the state of Texas. Between $3 and $15 billion a month is what we were responsible for. And in that receipt, we know that the legislature and all of the other entities within the governmental organization, they are responsible for dispersing those funds. Then we have other philanthropic organizations that are responsible for dispersing funds. We have other public organizations that are also responsible for dispersing funds. What I'm finding is if I had the funding to do certain things, I could make a much bigger impact. I thought that people would be the most difficult resource to find. I'm finding that when people really grab a hold of the vision and really get a hold of it, they will give everything that they have towards building that. And so my responsibility is to build the people. And what I've found is that in various different formats, the Lord is giving us provision to be able to meet the vision. So, outside of building the people and receiving the funding necessary, and other resources, not just funding, but we need equipment, we need this, we need that. Going out in the community and starting to tear down those walls, that has been the bigger effort. And helping people to receive the education that they need, but also to be able to receive the education that they need. Because especially coming from a pastoral position, coming from a church position, not everybody wants to hear my voice. And I'm okay with that. I've never considered my voice to be that critical anyway. But when I do have a solution, I am never one to go and to tear down the walls, but I come and ask you to partner with me so that we can address circumstances and situations. And so helping to, help people to know my heart, which I'm sure that this podcast helps people to hear maybe something that's a little bit different than what they've heard in the past. Helping people not just to hear my heart, but to hear God's heart. And to be able to receive and understand that we're not here for, I am not here for condemnation, but I am here for building of individuals. I am not here to destroy, but I'm here to empower. And helping people to understand that even from my perch, that I am not looking down on people, but I am looking at systems and finding ways that we can address systems and fill gaps in systems so that everyone feels equitably helped. And that is, and I'm sorry, I've probably given you now 5 focal points, but just to know that that is my focus. I am, as I shared, I am a systems type person. And so when I see people that are falling through the gaps, whether it be through incarceration, whether it be through mental health issues, whether it be through economic gaps, whether it be food insecurity gaps. We've got so many gaps that I'm saying, why don't we fix this? Why don't we work with the government to do this? Why don't we work with these private groups to work to deal with this? Why don't we? Well, if instead of saying, why don't we, I say, why don't I? And I feel like I am a solutioner. I am one of those who is responsible and accountable because I have a level of authority and influence. My responsibility is to use it positively. So I can't say that there's one specific thing, but I can say that I think if we all took our own personal responsibility to be an impactful entity in our community, there's nothing we couldn't accomplish. So I'll leave that on the table and let you sort it out.
Yeah, I love it. Pastor Darius Todd, thank you so much. Where can people find you? Because I know that I'm sure people will want to reach out, make connection, work together. What is the easiest way for them to do that?
I would say my website, dariustodd.com. DARIUSTODD.com. I know some people spell Darius different and they spell Todd with 1 D. So DARIUSTODD.com is the easiest way to get a hold of me.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been an absolutely amazing conversation. So I know this is one of many that I'm sure we'll have.
I look forward to the next one.
Yeah. Appreciate your time.
My pleasure.
This podcast was presented by thecentralstate.com. Thecentralstate.com is a consortium focused on improving resilience in Central Texas by using evidence from research to improve human and community health. This website highlights health and research data by county and opportunities to find funding and resources for mental health programs in our area. Additionally, there are interactive calendars that keep you up to speed regarding what is happening right here in Central Texas.